Hi, I'm going to take you through how to write an essay that has a single focus. So for the purpose of this exercise, I'm going to use the Harry Potter series, and we're going to address the question, how does Harry Potter demonstrate the arc of the hero? Now, the arc of the hero is something that you can read more about in Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. And Joseph Campbell analyzed myths and legends around the world, and he discovered that almost every hero story follows a very similar sequence of events that happen to the hero. This is the sequence of events just so that you understand where our essay is going here. The hero starts in their usual life, which is disrupted by some sort of invitation to adventure. Now, some of these adventures are chosen, where the hero decides to go on an adventure, and some of these adventures are unchosen, where the hero is thrown into an adventure against their will. The hero faces a series of trials that test their abilities and their worthiness to become a hero. Ultimately, the protagonist or the potential hero has to face an ultimate test that exploits their specific weakness in life. Lastly, the hero always overcomes that final test and they are transformed in some way. In some stories, they literally die and are reborn, and in other stories, they just return in a renewed state. So we can see this arc of the hero in stories from ancient times all the way until modern times. In ancient times, the story of Odysseus or Ulysses served the arc of the hero. Another really famous one was that of Beowulf. Beowulf started out as a warrior, and through his tests of his physical might and skill, he overcomes all of them and ultimately becomes a king as a result. In modern day, we still have the arc of the hero, one of my favorites being Alice in Wonderland. Now, hers is definitely one of those journeys that was unchosen because she didn't choose to go on the journey. Instead, she fell down the rabbit hole, and she comes out on the other side of her trials a much more mature person. That's her renewed state, her being a little bit more of an adult and less of an irresponsible child. Another one of my favorites is in The Matrix. You can definitely see that Neo chooses his journey when he chooses to take the red pill and not the blue pill. Neo goes through a series of trials in which he discovers his powers and learns his ability, eventually facing Agent Smith. Now, in The Matrix, he literally dies and then is reborn in his renewed state. Now, the first thing that you need to do when you're thinking about your essay is you need to decide 3 things to focus on. So for my arc of the hero, I'm going to focus on these 3 things. I'm going to focus on the call to adventure, the trials the hero undergoes, and the crisis or the ultimate test at the end. I'll probably mention the hero's reborn state after this ultimate test. Once I know my 3 focus points, I'm ready to write my introduction. If you haven't already watched my video on how to write an introduction, you should probably stop this video right now and go watch that one and then come back. Using the format that I used in my previous video about introductions, this is going to be my introductory paragraph for this essay. In here, you can see that it has the 3 major parts that I outlined in the other video. The first being the global context. From there, I draw down the scope of what I'm analyzing from a global scale down to a specific scale within the text. Lastly, I'm going to draw down the focus of my introduction down to my specific points that I want to point out. So in this case, I'm going to be focusing on the call to adventure, the trials, and the ultimate test that leads to a renewed state. Now that I'm looking at my focus points, I'm going to tackle these in the order that I listed them. So call to adventure is going to be first. The first thing that I want to do is align my area of focus for my body paragraph 1 with the main point of my paper. Keep it in mind that my area of focus for this particular body paragraph is going to be call to adventure, and my main point of this paper is that Harry Potter fulfills the arc of the hero. So if I just get rid of the prompts and I take a look at the 2 issues that I'm dealing with, a call to adventure and Harry Potter fulfilling the arc of the hero, I can basically add a transition or a relationship word. So the call to adventure somehow begins Harry Potter fulfilling the arc of the hero. So now that I have this idea that the call to adventure is going to begin Harry Potter's journey to fulfilling the arc, one of the first things I need to do is link this back to my introduction. So I need to point out that one of the first alignments between the arc of the hero and Harry Potter can be seen when, and then I go into the second part, when the call to adventure begins Harry's journey. So the first part that I have here connects the big idea to the paper. And the second part of this topic sentence connects to the specific focus of this body paragraph, which is the call to adventure. So now that I have my topic sentence for point 1, let's go ahead and read through it. One of the first alignments between the arc of the hero and Harry Potter can be seen when the call to adventure begins Harry's journey. So the two pieces of evidence that I'm going to deal with are the letters that appear on Harry's door and Hagrid appearing also. Now what I need to do is I've got to write my peel paragraph for my body paragraph 1. So I need to make sure that you've already watched my other video on how to write a peel paragraph. If you haven't done so, I want you to stop this video, go watch that one, and then come back. Because I'm going to skip some steps here, and we're going to look at the end result. So this is the end result for my peel paragraph for body paragraph 1. If you'd like to read through it on your own, go ahead and pause the video and do so. Otherwise, we're going to do it together here in 1 second. Now we can see the point, evidence, and explanation parts of my peel paragraph. So it starts with my point. One of the first alignments between the arc of the hero and Harry Potter can be seen when the call to adventure begins Harry's journey. After that, I have my evidence. After describing Harry's current living situation, sleeping under the stairs at his aunt and uncle's house, Rowling explains how mysterious letters keep arriving at the house. The letters are addressed to Harry and are invitations to his attendance at Hogwarts. These sentences are my evidence. They don't contain any type of opinion or analysis. They are strictly facts describing events that explicitly happen within the story. Then I go into my explanation. Letters in general have a reputation for enthralling our human emotions and capturing our attention. Letters begin and end relationships, accept and reject applicants, and invite people to opportunity on a daily basis. Harry's letters are no different. They open the door to opportunity, offering an adventure which will forever change his life. This paragraph addresses everything that we want to say and all the analysis we want to do about the letters. But we still have to tackle the evidence of Hagrid, and we're going to do that through a separate piece of evidence and explanation attached to the same peel paragraph. That's going to complicate our peel structure, because after I get done with my first point, evidence, and explanation, I'm going to add another piece of evidence. For my second piece of evidence, I'm going to start with a linking statement, something that transitions from one piece of evidence to the next. And I start that by saying, unfortunately, because the letters are ignored. That allows me to acknowledge the piece of evidence that I just gave previously and move into my next piece of evidence. So, although it starts, unfortunately, because the letters are ignored, I go into my second piece of evidence when I say, a stronger invitation is made in the form of a giant, named Hagrid, who arrives to personally invite Harry to Hogwarts. Then I have to address my analysis for Hagrid. The arrival of an agent of Hogwarts changes the tone of the invitation from one of opportunity to one of necessity, not that Harry would turn down the opportunity to continue sleeping under the stairs. Hagrid's insistence, along with Harry's eagerness, make the journey and opportunity for adventure seem that much more exciting of a prospect. Lastly, we have to create our link. And for a link, remember, we've got to go back to the idea in the original point. So I do that here. With this first step, Harry accepts the journey being offered to him and initiates his eventual transformation into a powerful witch and hero. These two ideas directly connect with one another. The idea of the arc of the hero being fulfilled by Harry Potter and Harry Potter eventually transforming into a hero. So now I've completed my analysis of the first part of my paper, the call to adventure. It's time to move on to the second part, the trials. Similar to what I did in the first paragraph, I want to think about how I can align my area of focus for my second paragraph with the main point of my paper. I can see here that my main area of focus for this paragraph will be trials, and the main point of the paper, once again, is that Harry Potter fulfills the arc of the hero. I'm going to look at these two concepts in isolation, then I'm going to add a transition word that helps me think about the relationship between these two ideals. I come out with this point. The trials Harry endures lead him to fulfilling the arc of the hero. Now I want to write my point for my second paragraph. I need to start with some sort of transition phrase that allows me to move from the topic of the previous paragraph to the topic of this paragraph. I begin with, once Harry's journey to adventure has been chosen, and this references everything that we covered in the first paragraph. But it also moves me forward so that I can talk about the topic of my second paragraph, which is, he encounters trials which test his physical and moral strength. Then I need to link it to the main point of my paper, which is, just as the arc of the hero predicts. When I look at all of this together, it reads, once Harry's journey to adventure has been chosen, he encounters trials which test his physical and moral strength, just as the arc of the hero predicts. Now I want to think about what types of evidence I'm going to use in order to prove this point. These are 3 trials that Harry goes through in his initial experience in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. He first has to make friends, then he has to deal with bullies, then he has to solve the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. Now, in our first paragraph, I came up with a piece of evidence and a piece of analysis for each one of the pieces of evidence. In this case, that seems like way too much work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat all 3 of these pieces of evidence as one big block, saying that making friends, dealing with bullies, and solving the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone are all individual pieces of evidence that contribute to one big analysis. In this case, in my analysis, I want to identify the fact that making friends, dealing with bullies, and solving the mystery all show increasing levels of severity and difficulty, and that dealing with them shows bravery and maturity. Now it's time to start putting this paragraph together. I'll start with my point. Once Harry's journey to adventure has been chosen, he encounters trials which test his physical and moral strength, just as the arc of the hero predicts. Harry's first challenge is that of making friends, which he quickly overcomes when he meets Ron and Hermione on the train to Hogwarts. He then is confronted with the difficult task of learning how to navigate bullies, in the form of Draco Malfoy and his gang. But the thing that tests Harry the most is his effort to solve the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. You'll see that when I mentioned the evidence, I didn't leave it shallow. I didn't just say that he has to make friends, deal with bullies, and solve the mystery of the Philosopher's Stone. I provided a little greater context for each one of these pieces of evidence. Now it's time to write my analysis. Each test that Harry encounters is harder than the next. With each test, Harry rises to the challenge to become stronger and more mature. By the time Harry has confronted all these challenges, he has passed through several important milestones that demonstrate his flourishing potential and aptitude for bravery, a key element of heroism. I analyzed each test, contributing to an overall point. I want to remind myself of my language in my original point, that he encounters tests which test his physical and moral strength, just as the arc of the hero predicts. And I want to involve similar language in my link. So this is what I come up with. The arc of the hero follows this pattern exactly, and can be used to predict both Harry's struggles and his triumphs over them. Once again, we can see how I used vocabulary from my point back in my link in order to make sure that there's a strong connection between the two. Now that we're done with the second thing on our list, the trials, it's time to move to the third one, the crisis. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through how to write this paragraph. I feel like you should understand how to write it well enough that you should be able to write that paragraph on your own. So give it a try and see how you do. Here is my essay as it stands so far. Go ahead and pause the video and read this through and see what you think about how the structure contributes to an understanding and accurate analysis of how the character fulfills the arc of the hero. Now it's time to write our conclusion for our essay. Remember back to the process that we used in order to write a good introduction. We started with a world context, then moved into the text and the theme, and then narrowed our focus even more specifically to exact characters and events. To write a good conclusion, we just want to reverse that process. We want to start with character and events, then work out to the text and the theme, and then further out into the world context. This is what that sounds like. I'll start with the specific characters and events. The adventures that Harry throws himself into shape him into an outstanding character. Through facing various ordeals, he proves himself to be smart, selfless, and even powerful. By the end, Harry is no longer just the neglected boy sleeping under the stairs. He even claims a new level of respect for himself when he returns to his aunt in his uncle's house. Then I want to broaden the scope of what I'm looking at to the text and the context. This is exactly the progression of the classic hero. And the closeness with which Harry adheres to the classic model makes it seem unlikely that the parallels are coincidental. It seems more likely that Rowling's intent was to make Harry Potter a classical hero tale in the literary sense. And now I want to pull even further back. It's a good thing she did this, since Harry seems to have become a role model and inspiration for millions of kids around the world. And the world would probably be a better place with more Harry Potters in it. That wraps up my conclusion. Let's take a look at the essay in its totality. This is the entire essay as I've written it. Keep in mind that it is missing a third body paragraph, which hopefully you'll write that on your own and see how it fits into the scope of this essay. Read this through thoroughly and come back to this video whenever you feel like you need a refresher on how to write a good 5-paragraph essay.